So I want you to picture a scenario that is, well, it's probably going to give a few of you some very uncomfortable flashbacks.
Oh, I can already guess where this is going.
Right, because we've all been there. You are looking at a master project dashboard. Let's say it's a Jira board or,
Well,
some massive enterprise tracking system.
yep.
And you are staring at 500 perfectly aligned green check
And a
marks.
beautiful site, usually.
Exactly. You've got color-coded Gantt charts. You've got spreadsheets that automatically sync to other spreadsheets. And like a folder full of requirements documents that someone spent 3 solid months writing.
And on paper, it is a flawless architectural blueprint.
It's perfect. And then, well, the software actually launches.
Right.
The client takes one look at it and is absolutely furious because the development team built exactly what was documented. But, and here's the kicker, what was documented makes absolutely no logical sense in the real world.
It's just a complete mess.
It really is. So have you ever been trapped in that kind of perfectly documented chaos?
I mean, it is the great unspoken tragedy of modern business. We have literally never had more tools to organize our work, yet everyone still walks out of the kickoff meeting nodding, and then 3 months later, nobody can actually explain how the pieces they are building fit together.
And that profound disconnect, that is the mission of our deep dive today. We're looking at a truly fascinating stack of internal sources. We've got strategic board reports, product positioning analysis, and internal financial documents, all detailing a proprietary platform called ALManac.
Which, just to be completely clear up front, is not just another project management tool.
No, definitely not.
The sources we're analyzing today map out what the creators believe is a fundamental paradigm shift in how, massive corporate enterprises process and handle complex change.
Okay, let's unpack this because we have all been stuck in that state of information overload, where adding a new project management tool usually just means, well, adding a new layer of busy work.
Yeah, another dashboard to check.
Exactly. But ALManac is attempting to move the goalposts entirely. The documents claim this platform shifts the objective from simply storing project requirements to actually measuring the quality of human thinking before anyone spends a single dime on development.
And to really grasp the magnitude of what ALManac is attempting, we first have to dissect the specific invisible disease it is trying to cure.
The invisible disease, I like that phrasing. Because usually, when a massive system rollout fails, we don't blame an invisible disease. We blame the developers for being too slow.
Right, or the project managers for missing a deadline.
Or the client for constantly changing their mind.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is that the internal documents point out a totally different reality. Most complex systems do not fail during delivery. They fail silently, long before the first line of code is written.
Wait, really? Before any code is written?
Yes, the original business intent, the actual core reason the CEO or the client wanted this thing built in the first place, it begins to fragment. It gets sliced up into disconnected Word documents, isolated user interface mockups, separate process flowcharts, and it just gets buried in endless Slack threads.
But I want to challenge you on that premise, though.
Yeah.
Because companies already spend millions of dollars on enterprise software to prevent exactly that kind of fragmentation.
They do, yeah.
I mean, if I'm running a massive project and I force my entire team to use standardized business process model and notation BPMN, doesn't that strict standardization force everything to be coherent by design? Like, how can you have a perfectly standardized model that still fails?
And that is the exact trap the sources highlight. Standardized tools, like your backlog managers, your ALM SATMs, your rigid BPMN flowchart tools, they create a dangerous illusion. Yeah, a system might look incredibly structured. You might have a perfectly formatted glossary. You might have a BPMN flowchart where every single box is perfectly aligned with arrows pointing to the next step.
Right, so it looks like a real executable plan.
It looks structured, but structured does not mean coherent. Let's say you're mapping out a mortgage approval process for a bank.
Okay.
You have a beautiful flowchart with 50 steps, but step 14 requires a piece of customer data that the system doesn't actually collect until step 22.
Oh, wow.
The structure is flawless, every box is there, but the logic is fundamentally broken.
Oh, I see. It's like having a perfectly formatted recipe card. You've got the title neatly centered at the top, you have bulleted list of ingredients and numbered steps for the instructions. The structure is undeniably that of a recipe.
Right.
But then you read the ingredients and it just says food, and the numbered instructions just say 1. apply heat.
Yes, exactly.
It has perfect formatting but zero coherence. You literally cannot cook anything with it. So people are essentially confusing neat paperwork with actual logical sense, which leads to massive rework and broken handoffs.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. And the stakes are incredibly high here,
Mm.
because in an enterprise environment, that recipe gets handed off to a team of highly paid software architects who are expected to just figure out what apply heat actually means.
Which is terrifying.
Very. When your perfectly formatted requirements contain hidden conflicts or the core intent is missing entirely, you are just masking a future failure. You are essentially building a very expensive bridge to nowhere.
And if you are the executive signing off on the budget based on a dashboard full of green lights, that has to be a nightmare. You might be organizing your own projects perfectly, but if the underlying logic has missing intent or duplicated effort, your structure is just masking a future failure.
Precisely. And this is exactly where the ALManac system enters the picture. Because if we accept that structure is just a mask, the obvious problem becomes, how do you actually measure if a massive, complex project makes logical sense?
Right. How do you objectively measure something as abstract as coherence?
Well, the internal board documents we have are very deliberate about how they position this. Initially, to make it palatable to executives, they label ALManac safely as an enterprise transformation governance platform.
Which is a very safe corporate-sounding category.
Very safe. But as you dig deeper into the product analysis, its true identity emerges. The creators describe it not as a governance tool, but as cognitive infrastructure.
Cognitive infrastructure. I mean, that sounds incredibly ambitious, borderline science fiction. It implies the software is somehow thinking for you. How does a piece of code actually evaluate human logic? Let's get into the mechanics of that, because I don't want to just, accept the buzzwords.
It's not science fiction, I promise. It relies on some very rigorous computer science. Instead of just acting as a digital filing cabinet for your documents, ALManac actively analyzes the relationships between your ideas.
Okay.
The sources note that it handles complex domain logic through taxonomy trees and ontology links.
Okay, we need to pause and translate that. Taxonomy trees and ontology links. What does that actually look like in practice for the user?
So think of a taxonomy tree simply as a master categorization system. It ensures everyone speaks the exact same language.
Got it.
And ontology links are essentially the software mapping the relationships, like the family tree of your project's data. So if your marketing team writes a requirement about a client ID, and your database team writes a spec for a customer number.
ALManac's ontology mapping algorithmically cross-references the glossary.
Exactly. It understands those two teams are talking about the exact same thing. Or conversely, it flags that a critical term used in step 5 of your project isn't defined anywhere in the system. It basically searches for orphaned logic.
And that brings us to the visual evidence from our sources, which is where this really clicked for me. Looking at the promotional mockups included in the files, ALManac features an interface with a coherence overview. It acts as a literal heat map for the system's logic.
It takes that invisible disease and makes it glaringly visible.
Yes. And the specific metrics it scores are fascinating. On the main dashboard image, you don't see a count of how many tickets are open. Instead, you see an overall coherence score of 72 out of 100.
Right.
And it breaks that score down. You have intent completeness sitting at 78, structural quality at 65, traceability coverage at 70, glossary alignment at 75. But then you have ambiguity sitting at a troubling 58.
And notice the profound shift there. It is not evaluating the speed of your workers. It is running an algorithmic diagnostic on how much ambiguity exists in your team's collective thinking.
And it gets even more granular. It flags specific issues right on the dashboard. It literally counts 12 instances of missing intent and 8 ambiguous requirements.
Yeah.
It is catching human logic errors before anyone writes a single line of actual product code.
Which is huge.
Here's where it gets really interesting. There's a quote from the brand's core philosophy in the source text that I think perfectly encapsulates this. They write, "Lighthouses do not control the sea, they reveal direction."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that lighthouse metaphor is vital for understanding their differentiation in the market.
How so?
Well, in a corporate world where every manager is drowning in massive data dashboards, ALManac deliberately chooses not to add more data to your plate. A lighthouse doesn't steer your ship. It doesn't write your code for you.
It just warns you about the rocks before you crash your ship into them.
Exactly. It operates as a high-level orientation system. The sources describe a tiny visual dot that sits in the header of the interface. Just a single, quiet point of light indicating the overall health and coherence of your project.
That's brilliant.
It's a signal cutting through the noise. It tells the user where the system's logic breaks down, allowing them to fix it before they hand the project off to heavy-duty execution-level architecture tools like Eris or Jira.
Okay, I hear all of this, and I love the philosophy, but, I mean, if I am a skeptical enterprise executive listening to this, I'm thinking, this sounds like brilliant slideware.
Oh, absolutely.
We see this all the time. A consulting firm comes up with a beautiful concept for cognitive infrastructure, but it's just mock-ups in theory. Is there actual substance here?
This raises an important question, and it's one the finance board report in our Stack tackles head-on. Because you are absolutely right, philosophy does not get funded by corporate boards without hard substance.
Right.
And the board documents reveal some staggering repository metrics.
What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Well, this is not a thin startup fantasy built over a weekend. The code repository contains roughly 102 core JavaScript source files, comprising over 233,000 lines of code.
Wait, really? 233,000.
Yes, and they have built 264 automated test files, which include nearly 50,000 lines of test code alone just to ensure the logic engine works.
That is massive.
And just to show the velocity of the engineering, there were 521 code commits in just over a single month between March and April of 2026.
Okay, I have to react to that. You do not write 233,000 lines of code and 50,000 lines of automated tests just to build a pretty dashboard mockup.
No, you don't.
That requires immense engineering discipline. That proves the underlying algorithm, the ontology linking and ambiguity scoring we talked about earlier, is actually functioning.
Yeah.
So the board is looking at this massive piece of internal intellectual property. How do they even begin to put a price tag on a machine that measures human thought?
The board synthesizes the valuation by analyzing two very different scenarios. They look at the replacement cost versus the raw asset sale value.
Okay.
They estimate that if a rival company wanted to build this exact Coherence engine from scratch today, the replacement cost would sit somewhere between 1.1 million and 1.8 million euros.
That is a serious initial investment.
And that is just for the core engine. The report notes that if they needed to fully harden this for enterprise security, adding multi-tenant cloud operations, ensuring it passes massive corporate compliance audits, that build cost could easily push up to 3 million euros.
But that's what it costs to build. What is it worth if they wanted to just sell it today?
That is where the math gets sobering. If they just sold the intellectual property as is right now as a pure asset sale to a strategic buyer, it would only fetch between 450,000 and 900,000 euros.
Wait, why is there such a massive gap? Why would something that costs over €1 million to build sell for half that amount?
Because right now, ALManac doesn't have a paying customer base attached to it. Buying intellectual property without proven market traction is incredibly high risk for an acquirer. It's essentially like buying a state-of-the-art sports car, but the engine has never been tested on an actual highway.
So what does this all mean? Synthesizing those financial models, it paints a very clear picture of where this platform is in its life cycle. This is a late-stage prototype or an early productized platform.
Yes.
It is a highly sophisticated, deeply valuable internal asset that is quite literally sitting on the launchpad.
Which brings us to the most complex challenge outlined in these documents. Having a brilliant algorithm that measures intent is one thing. Convincing, stubborn, set-in-their-ways corporate architects to change how they work and actually buy it, that is something else entirely.
That's the real hurdle, isn't it? Because you have a 1.5 million euro cognitive infrastructure platform that requires a fundamental mindset shift.
Right.
You can't exactly just put a subscribe now credit card field on a website and expect Fortune 500 companies to figure it out themselves.
Definitely not.
So how do they actually plan to take this to market?
The board's strategic recommendation on the go-to-market plan is explicit and very strict. They say, do not sell this as a pure SaaS software as a service subscription yet. And equally, do not sell it as pure consulting, where you are just billing hourly rates to give advice.
Okay.
They strongly recommend going to market as a productized service.
Let's make the productized service concept concrete for everyone listening, because it's a crucial distinction. Think about the fitness industry. You could sell someone a high-tech, 24/7 gym membership, and then leave them completely alone to figure out how all the complicated machines work.
Right, which would be pure SaaS.
Exactly. And the user usually gets overwhelmed and quits after a month.
Precisely. The tool alone isn't enough if the user doesn't know the methodology.
On the other extreme, you could just sell them a guy who yells at them to do push-ups in an empty room.
Yeah.
That's pure consulting. You have the expertise, but no scale and no specialized tools.
Yeah.
A productized service is selling them the high-tech gym access, the platform, Plus, the dedicated personal trainer who designs the routine shows them how to use the machines and ensures they actually get the results.
That analogy perfectly captures the board strategy. The domain ALManac operates in is overwhelmingly complex.
Mm.
We are talking about massive enterprise transformations, strict compliance regulations, and thousands of interconnected requirements.
It's a lot to manage.
It is. If you just hand a corporate team the software, they will fail to set up their taxonomy trees correctly, they will get frustrated, and they will churn. If you pair the software with a dedicated implementation service, an expert who guides them through resolving their logic gaps, you prove the platform's value immediately.
But if I'm a frontline developer, though, I probably don't care about enterprise governance. I just want to write my code. So whose budget is actually paying for this high-tech gym and personal trainer? Like, who is the target audience?
They are targeting the individuals who acutely feel the pain of the brick and handoffs we discussed earlier. They are bypassing the individual developers entirely.
Yep.
They are directly targeting the head of architecture, the lead business analysts, and the enterprise architects.
That makes perfect sense. Because when a multi-million-dollar project fails, the CEO doesn't go yell at the junior developer who coded the button perfectly to spec.
No, they don't.
They yell at the architect who designed the flawed specification in the first place. The architect is the one whose neck is constantly on the line.
And the architect's entire job is ensuring system coherence. But here is the most interesting part of the strategy. The immediate goal outlined in the board report is not to achieve massive global scale or dominate the market right out of the gate.
No.
The goal is incredibly modest. They only want to secure 2 to 5 paying enterprise pilots.
Just 2 to 5. For a system with nearly 250,000 lines of code, that seems drastically low. What is the business logic behind aiming that small?
It is a highly calculated financial maneuver. Securing those first few pilots validates the pricing model and proves that the implementation process is repeatable across different companies.
Oh, I see.
Remember the valuation gap we talked about? Right now, ALManac is valued based on how much it costs to build that 1.1 to 1.8 million replacement costs.
The build cost valuation.
But the moment they have recurring revenue from those 2 to 5 pilots, the financial math completely flips. They can transition from a build cost valuation to a software revenue multiple valuation. Yeah. In the enterprise software sector, a proven SaaS product with recurring revenue is often valued at 5 to 10 times its annual revenue. That is how you transition an internal project worth maybe €1 million into a highly lucrative, multi-million-dollar software business.
Because suddenly, to an investor or a buyer, you aren't just selling a pile of complex JavaScript. You are selling a proven, scalable, repeatable solution to a universal corporate nightmare.
Exactly.
That is a brilliant strategic pivot to bridge the gap between a profound philosophical idea and hard commercial reality.
It proves that they don't just understand software architecture, they fundamentally understand the economics of enterprise behavior.
So to bring all of this together, we have been on quite a journey in this deep dive. We started by uncovering the trap of false structure. How perfect formatting, like a flawless BPMN flowchart, can completely mask deeply flawed, disconnected logic.
Yep.
We explored how ALManac cures this by acting as a lighthouse, providing a single visual signal, the coherence heat map, to algorithmically measure the actual intent of our thinking.
We examined the hard repository metrics, the 233,000 lines of code proving this is a robust reality. And we unpack the financial strategy of using a productized service model to target the exact architects who feel the pain of failed handoffs the most.
It really forces you to look at how we all work a little differently. I want to ask you, the listener, to look at your own professional life today. Look at your endless to-do lists, your meeting agendas, your perfectly formatted project specs.
Are they actually coherent?
Right, or do they just look structured? Are you just reading a recipe that says food and heat? When you are drowning in data, are you building more dashboards or are you actually looking for the signal?
And that leaves us with one final, broader implication to consider from all these sources. If systems like ALManac can now actively read our documents, map our ontologies, and automatically detect the ambiguity and the missing intent in our human ideas before we even build anything, what happens when this kind of cognitive infrastructure truly scales?
That's a huge question.
Yeah. Will the future of human work simply become the act of refining our intentions and asking the right questions, while the systems do the heavy lifting of turning those thoughts into reality?